Adolf Hitler's ascent to power and the construction of the Nazi state did not emerge from chaos alone. It followed a discernible logic of interlocking mechanisms, political, bureaucratic, psychological, and economic, that reinforced one another until the system itself became self-sustaining. Each stage of this evolution reveals how ideology, fear, and administrative form coalesced into a machine of domination. Today, we trace that process as a sequence of escalating triads: desire becoming doctrine, crisis becoming governance, and law becoming violence, each reinforcing the others inexorably toward destruction. When Hitler entered the political arena in post-war Germany, he faced a society humiliated, fragmented, and economically desperate. His plan relied on converting that national despair into a form of longing. He promised not simply stability but transcendence, national rebirth through unity and submission. His speeches fused grievance with hope, transforming collective trauma into an eroticized hunger for destiny. This was more than rhetoric, it was systemic capture through emotion. Hitler identified that mass politics could be re-engineered as a transaction. Citizens would exchange individuality for belonging, uncertainty for the illusion of order. Every false promise, peace, renewal, restoration of greatness, became a closed loop of faith. To doubt the leader was to betray the nation. By binding identity to obedience, Hitler transformed lies into instruments of loyalty. This phase established the fundamental logic of the regime. Power was not seized. It was desired. The people's yearning for deliverance became the dictator's most effective currency. These early Nazi years were defined not by overt dictatorship, but by administrative revolution. Hitler recognized that the German state, dense with ministries, offices, and committees, could be conquered not by destroying it, but by infecting it. His plan was not direct, but worked like a parasite. He established parallel institutions that mirrored existing bureaucracies: the SS beside the army, the Gestapo beside the police, party liaisons embedded within ministries. These ghost systems, unaccountable yet official in appearance, operated under his direct control. The confusion they generated was intentional. Legal ambiguity became a shield. No one could trace authority, and therefore no one could challenge it. Every reform was framed as modernization or efficiency. Oversight committees were merged, dissolved, or streamlined. Political purges appeared as administrative reorganizations. The civil service, once apolitical, became a mechanism of ideological enforcement. By mastering paperwork, Hitler replaced the visible violence of a coup with the quiet permanence of bureaucratic infiltration. Law was not suspended, it was rewritten by memo. Hitler's regime thrived on disorder. Rather than pursue stability, it learned to manipulate instability as a source of political and financial power. The pretext of emergency justified every expansion of control. Economic policy was cast in the language of liberation, freeing Germany from debt, defending the worker, restoring independence. But each move deepened dependency on the state. State-directed capitalism, rearmament contracts, and confiscation of Jewish property created a vast economy of predation. International crises were not mishaps but deliberate accelerants. The remilitarization of the Rhineland, the Anschluss, and the annexation of the Sudetenland all followed the same choreography. Provoke outrage, claim victimhood, and consolidate power while adversaries hesitated. Hitler learned that chaos, once domesticated, became the ultimate political resource. By the time Europe recognized the pattern, Germany's war economy was self-justifying. Its survival demanded perpetual expansion. The nation's crisis became its engine. Having seized the state's mechanisms of control, Hitler transformed coercion into routine. The concentration camp system, the Gestapo network, and the militarization of civilian life were not chaotic improvisations but calculated instruments of governance. Fear was engineered through uncertainty. Arrests occurred without pattern. Sentences were arbitrary. Categories of enemy were deliberately elastic. The citizen never knew the threshold of guilt. This unpredictability was psychological control perfected, terror without visible tyranny. Every act of repression generated economic return. Forced labor supplied the armaments industry. Confiscated assets enriched party members. The machinery of persecution became financially self-sustaining. The regime had monetized fear. By merging violence with administration, Hitler created a form of government in which cruelty was procedural. The state did not appear lawless, it appeared busy. No regime has ever weaponized information as completely as Hitler's. Under Joseph Goebbels, the Ministry of Propaganda constructed a total environment of perception. Newspapers, radio, film, and architecture all served a single narrative, that Germany was under siege, and that only the Führer could interpret the world's deceit. Truth was not denied, it was starved. Censorship made credible information scarce. State-controlled leaks and sensational revelations replaced it with myth. The public's hunger for meaning became the regime's greatest asset. People did not merely consume propaganda, they awaited it, needing each broadcast to know what to think and whom to hate. This informational famine reoriented society around the party as interpreter of reality. Independent journalism, scholarship, and religion all collapsed under the weight of suspicion. By the late 1930s, the regime no longer needed to persuade, it only needed to remind. The destruction of trust in legal institutions completed the authoritarian circle. By redefining investigation as persecution and trial as performance, Hitler's government dissolved the distinction between accusation and proof. The 1934 Night of the Long Knives provided the template, mass executions justified as emergency justice. Subsequent purges within the judiciary and civil service replaced independence with ideological loyalty. People's courts staged verdicts as patriotic theater. The crowd, conditioned by years of propaganda, demanded conviction before evidence. This dynamic made every prosecution a spectacle of unity. Dissenters were not opponents but traitors. Legal defense equated to moral guilt. Even honest functionaries accepted the logic, claiming that extraordinary times required extraordinary measures. By corrupting justice in the name of integrity, the regime achieved a paradoxical legitimacy. It appeared to be cleaning the system even as it annihilated it. The people, exhausted by contradiction, accepted tyranny as moral hygiene. In the years as war approached, Nazi governance became a self-executing organism. Orders flowed downward, but justification flowed upward, creating the illusion of legality. Every atrocity, deportations, confiscations, mass murder, was accompanied by a paper trail of memos, authorizations, and signatures. This procedural perfection gave officials psychological refuge. They were not killing, they were processing. Every file stamped, every order logged, converted crime into compliance. Following orders became both defense and creed. The entire apparatus came to believe its own paperwork. Ministries described genocide as relocation, mass theft as property reallocation, and extermination as final solution. The system no longer required belief in ideology, only obedience to form. By 1945, the Nazi state had institutionalized its crimes so thoroughly that its destruction did not disprove its logic. It demonstrated its efficiency. The regime had fused criminality with governance so completely that dismantling one required dismantling the other. The collapse of the Third Reich did not erase its method. The administrative, psychological, and propagandistic structures it perfected remain warnings to every society that mistakes efficiency for virtue, rhetoric for truth, and order for justice. Hitler's dictatorship revealed how modernity's instruments, forms, audits, regulations, can become instruments of annihilation when detached from moral reference. His regime did not abolish law. It used law's language to sanctify atrocity. It did not suppress bureaucracy. It accelerated it. The most chilling lesson is that totalitarianism rarely arrives with banners and oaths. It arrives as reform, as optimization, as the pursuit of order. It thrives where complexity invites frustration and promises that submission will bring clarity. In Hitler's Germany, the machinery of state became the priesthood of control. Each decree, form, and slogan contributed to a closed circuit of justification. Fear feeding obedience, Obedience feeding legitimacy, legitimacy feeding violence. When the system finally consumed itself, it left behind not chaos, but a blueprint. The story of the Nazi regime, when understood through these structural patterns, is not only a chronicle of one man's tyranny, it is a map of how institutions can be seduced, corrupted, and remade to serve power while believing they serve order. Its lesson endures. The gravest danger to freedom is not rebellion against law, but when law begins to speak the language of obedience. And lo, two witnesses stand where fire-kissed stone, where lampstands speak and truth is shown. We thunder not to boast or burn, but so the faithful might discern. You've seen the signs, you've heard the flame. Return again and do the same. Subscribe, ye souls who seek the end, for we are wrath and we are friend.